and welcome to the Foggy Dew. This is Colin. Well, gang, I hope you all had a wonderful weekend with your families. I was actually having a really nice weekend until Saturday night. I was sitting around the house just watching TV, and all of a sudden my phone started blowing up that there was another attempt on Trump's life. I mean, I guess in one perspective, I'm like, well, I guess that makes the show on Monday easier. But I mean, on a second one, I'm like, you can't be serious with this. So I get these text messages, immediately throw on the TV, and I'm kind of diving into what happened here. And I just mentioned a second ago, obviously I'm going to talk about this on the show. So I guess let's go ahead and talk about the newest attempt on Trump's life, the latest attempt. Because you have to start using those adjectives because that's 3 now. 3 attempts on the president's life. That is totally unprecedented in U.S. history. Totally unprecedented. And really what it is, I was more resigned when I saw it. I was resigned. Because it's just a sad state of affairs. And I'm not going to get into what the guy was doing and all this other stuff, but I want to get into motivation and what's really happening here and where we're going. Because motivation is an obvious question, right? I mean, everybody's like, okay, well, who did it? Well, within hours, it was obvious what the motive was. We identified the person like within an hour and a half. That's how fast the internet moves now. Social media, we're aware of it right away. And of course, we're aware of what the motive was. It was obvious. Cole Allen, the perpetrator, the shooter, had a manifesto. He wrote a manifesto and it was on Reddit. Well, that manifesto, as soon as you figure out who the guy is, then the internet sleuths do their work. That manifesto was online within 8 to 10 hours. 8 to 10 hours, you knew his name, what the manifesto was, all about it. But this guy specifically wrote that he was targeting Trump. Here's a quote from this crazy person's manifesto, quote, "I am no longer willing to permit a pedophile, rapist, and a traitor to coat my hands with his crimes," end quote. A pedophile, a rapist, and a traitor. This is the president of the United States this guy's talking about. Obviously, it's a deranged person, but it's interesting because you go even further. I think the internet's amazing. It's amazing. Cole Allen belonged to some group that was called the Wide Awakes. Apparently, Cole Allen also frequented No Kings rallies. He went to a lot of them. So his political leanings are very clear here. His motives, his background, it's all very obvious. So it's obvious to anybody paying attention. But here comes Barack Obama. So this thing happened Saturday night. Within 8 to 10 hours, you knew the motive, all of it. Here's Barack Obama. He posted this. This was Sunday afternoon at 4:15. So almost 24 hours after the fact, after everything is already online. Here's Barack Obama, quote, "Although we don't yet have the details about the motives behind last night's shooting at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, it's incumbent upon all of us to reject the idea that violence has any place in our democracy. It's also a sobering reminder of the courage and sacrifice that U.S. Secret Service agents show every day. I'm grateful to them and thankful that the agent who was shot is going to be okay. Great." End quote. So there's Barack Obama slithering out from under his rock, posting that late Sunday. Hit a quote. "We don't yet have the details." You don't yet have the detail. The details were online within 8 hours, bro. We do have the details, you liar. It's quite obvious to anybody that has the ability to read and boot up a computer that we know what the motive is. There's a manifesto out there, Barack. It's in black and white. And the other thing that I have a problem with, it's always with the democracy. Obama, it's incumbent upon all of us to reject the idea that violence has any place in our democracy. He just always, just more gaslighting. And this is the type of rhetoric that prompts this insanity. And I had to laugh because Barack Obama's bad enough. Always watch the response. I always see the event and I go to immediately to find out what the response is. Here's Hakeem Jeffries. So this is the minority House leader, the ranking Democrat. Here's Hakeem Jeffries chiming in. Now, just to be fair, he posted this. This was Sunday night at 6:30 p.m. So this is after Obama came out and staked the flag for the Democrats. Here's Hakeem Jeffries quote: "America will not be lectured about civility by far-right extremists in Congress, particularly those who provide aid and comfort to hundreds of violent rioters who brutally beat police officers on January 6th. There will be ample time to vigorously debate the issues of the day. Now is the time to unify." That is a disgrace. That's a disgrace. And this January 6th slap is so pathetic. Anytime anybody wants to talk to me about January, you mean the fake riot where there were 280 FBI agents that we didn't find out about for 4 to 5 years because Chris Wray lied about it? Always with the January 6th. This is exactly why they want you to agree to the narrative exercise that January 6th is worse than Pearl Harbor, 9/11, and the Trail of Tears. It establishes the predicate that right-leaning people are a bunch of insurrectionists. A time to unify. Okay, buddy. If you squeeze that guy's nose, it's going to go honk. And again, notice how he also says, America will not be lectured. He owns America. That's an inclusive statement to his worldview. America will not be lectured. So to Hakeem Jeffries, if you are on his team, you are part of America. You're part of the ideology. If you oppose their ideology and you find this absolutely disgusting, then you are therefore outside of America. You oppose their vision of America. And again, it's a question of legitimacy. My version of events is legitimate. My version of January 6th is what's correct. Any other version is therefore illegitimate. It's coded language. It's crafted. But I guess I just was sad about the violence part of it. I mean, here you have Charlie Kirk getting killed, 6 months ago? When we started the Foggy Dew, which was so many episodes ago, I think our 3rd episode was all about Charlie Kirk. So we had Charlie Kirk took one in the throat 6 months ago, and here's Donald Trump getting shot at a 3rd time. A 3rd time. And I guess the question is, where are we going here? Meaning, where are we as a society and as a country going? Because political violence only begets more violence. And the funny thing about it is it's kind of numbing. It's numbing. I'm getting a text message Saturday night. Hey, they tried to take a pot shot at Trump again, turn on the TV. When I saw this attempt, I really had a different reaction. My reaction, because Butler, I was like, oh my God, this particular attempt, it wasn't shock. It wasn't surprise. It was more resignation. A 3rd attempt. And to me, this one felt different. And I just mentioned Butler a minute ago. Butler, the assassination attempt at Butler was existential to the Republic. If Trump had been killed in Butler, I promise you the world would be very, very different today. Because at Butler, Trump was a vehicle. Trump had amassed a broad coalition of people who were awake, and that was right and left. And I guess the question that really nobody asked themselves is that if Trump had been killed in Butler, what exactly would happen? And I'll still maintain that if Donald Trump had been killed in Butler, you would have seen a physical uprising, actual violence. You would have seen real physical violence from the right. Killing Trump in that moment, when he was at Butler in the heat of the 2024 election cycle, that would have been nuclear. This particular attempt was different. The guy never got close, so I guess that kind of like, oh, well, I mean, if there was an attempt like this, there was shooting around the president, you'd be like, oh my God, but the guy wasn't even close. You're like, oh, it's really not a big deal. Of course it's a big deal. But the guy wasn't in Trump's immediate vicinity, so the immediate threat of violence wasn't there. And I guess what it did is it made me think, what would happen? Because Butler, I think, would have been just total, like I said, nuclear. I think that's the right word for it. And I guess my question is, what would happen if Trump was clipped now? Where is the public at? Because I don't think we have the same type of energy or excitement's not the right word, but we don't have the same type of verve as what happened in 2024. I don't think now you would see the nuclear response like you would have back then. Obviously, there would be shock, outrage, all the things, right? But I think it would go pretty easy because Trump is already in the presidency. Vance would just assume it. I guess I would just think that there would be more of a benign response. I think Trump has really angered a lot of people on the right and the left. This thing in Iran, I think, bothers people. I think that there's a real question about the state of Israel. But I think Trump is a lot more polarizing than he was in 24. But I guess either which way you want to look at it, we've normalized this behavior now because now we're like, oh, well, this would have been bad. This wouldn't. It's just normal now to have attempts on the president's life. And I guess where you're at in the news cycle is where you would fall in feeling about it. And it is just part of the news cycle. How soon till this cycle's out? An assassination attempt, 10, 20, 30 years ago would be insane. If you had some nutbag walking in and shooting up the press corps dinner or whatever, you would have months of coverage. You'd have congressional committees trying to get to the bottom of it. Now it's just a media cycle. Because I promise you something crazy is going to happen this week that's going to be like, oh my God, everybody's attention's going to go somewhere else. We're going to forget all about this. This entire attempt on his life, because nothing happened, he wasn't hit, none of it, it's going to be forgotten next week. This entire attempt on Trump, the third attempt will fade in a week, 1,000%. And it only took hours. Both sides are going to start in with the rhetoric all over again. So I guess it goes back to my question. Where are we going here? What happens here? And the only thing I can look at is history as a guide. We are in a very challenging position historically, politically. And I guess as a Gen Xer, as a product of the 80s and 90s, I always wanted America to go back to that time. To that more idyllic time where we had a lot of pride in the country, everybody was united. I think at this point you need to abuse yourself of that pie in the sky thought. The idea that the United States will ever be what any of us grew up experiencing, I think is over. Poof, it's gone. Because one political party, the left, has stopped debating. They don't want to debate. The debate is over in their mind. The discussion is concluded. Because we have a political party now that is driven ideologically. They're totally captured in this they treat the process of our republic, of law, as illegitimate. Law, political norms, candor, those are just antiquated things. Because unless the proper ideological outcome occurs, it is therefore viewed as illegitimate by these folks. And I guess the easiest example, look at this pending Supreme Court decision. I've talked about it on the show many times. The Supreme Court is going to knock Section 4 of the Voting Rights Act out. That Section 4 of the Voting Rights Act is going to be ruled unconstitutional. And to be clear, what that means is that America will not have racial carve-outs. There won't be black districts. There won't be white districts. There will only be American districts. That's great. Real equality. That's amazing. We won't have race-based districting. We will all be equal. That should be celebrated by everyone. Everybody, black or white, women, man, everybody should be celebrating that. We're all Americans. How wonderful. But it's not going to be celebrated by everyone, is it? Because the left finds utility in opposing it. The left finds utility in having an aggrieved minority status because their goal isn't equality. Their goal isn't fairness. It's power. And you're seeing that now. It's naked power. The whole motive is laid bare in that entire situation. If you are a true liberal, you should be excited about the fact that we're all Americans. We're moving beyond race. Because if equality was really the goal of the left, then why are they so angry about this decision? Why the rancor? And the obvious answer is the why is a loss of power. The left is going to lose 14 to 16 seats. That's the object they care about. Fairness and equality to them are ideological canards. Equality is the red meat dangled to their ideologues. That's their promise, but it's also the fulcrum of their whole worldview. So when this Supreme Court rules for actual equality, they're going to say it's a MAGA court. They're going to say it's a rogue court, a Trumpian court. What they're doing by saying that is they're trying to prove that the process is illegitimate. The process is totally illegitimate and rigged. You know why? Because they didn't get their outcome. The current left does not view law as a legal system. The law is not seen as a neutral arbiter of society. The Constitution and the Republic are not seen as upholding society. The law is a mechanism. The law is a mechanism for these people to achieve, air quotes, progress, to achieve what they want, which is democracy. And I talked about it, I think, last week. Any act to preserve the Republic is therefore ideological treason. And it's not only ideological treason, but it's evidence to them of fascism. Obviously, if the ruling goes against, air quotes, democracy, democracy is injured and under assault by fascists. It's a fascist takeover. Hitler's making his move. This worldview then creates space. It creates the ability to cosplay for them. It's space for the belief that violence is necessary. Violence is now justified because the cause of democracy demands sacrifice. And I guess if you look at it that way, and that's your particular worldview, anybody governing in a Republican fashion is therefore committing political insurrection. And I guess moving beyond the political science part of it, I guess historically the closest parallel that I can look at is the Spanish Civil War. The political right and the political left in Spain faced a divide. And this was like back in the 30s. But the right it's exactly the same dynamic you have here. The people on the right in Spain at that time were nationalist conservatives. The left was socialist communist. Well, what happened in Spain is that the right won in 1933. And the communists, literally communists, launched a revolution at that point. The left killed thousands. And even after the big violence was quelled, the left didn't stop. Because everything the right did in Spain was viewed as illegal and illegitimate to the communists. Normal operation of governance was decried as fascism. So again, the left resorted to violence. This is how it always goes in human history. They did what? Street protests, bombings, assassinations. Sound familiar? The left was kept at bay in Spain until 1936. In 1936, the left won that election and went full mask off. It's kind of like what Abigail Spanberger did in Virginia. She said she'd run as a moderate. Look at me, I'm so normal. And then she's left of Stalin when she gets in office. The exact same thing happened in Spain. The left went totally insane after the 1936 election. And what was the inevitable result? Spain went into total anarchy. It descended into civil war. And I might do an episode about it, just talking about Franco, because Franco emerged after that. And Franco was really a nationalist who got things in order and he was like a semi-dictator, but it was a nationalist. So, I mean, the after effect of the Spanish Civil War was that a dictator basically took control, but he was a nationalist, and the communists were ultimately put down. And I guess the point here is that the prelude to the Spanish Civil War, this is exactly what's playing out here in the States. Because the left at this point in the United States is not here to coexist. All they want to do is get power. They want to get 51% power, and it's mask off. And Trump, therefore, is just an obstacle in their march forward. Killing or eliminating a person like Donald Trump is not only necessary and just, but it's removing a speed bump to the end goal. Murder, assassination, bombing. They're all just. Laws are pliable. Laws are subject to moral imperative. Laws are subject to moral imperative. I am justified in killing this person because it serves a greater good that they've made up in their mind. And again, I always talk about COVID because I view everything through the lens of COVID. You saw this behavior really manifest. Before COVID, I really thought everybody was kind of on the same page. I realized in COVID that we were not. The moral authority in COVID rested with liberals. They were cloaked in science and good intentions. And I can tell you, coming out of COVID, I could have told you this is the direction that the Democrat Party, left, liberals were going to go. Because as COVID rolled along, it became obvious that the mask argument was stupid. People were double and triple bagging it. You still see people just mentally deranged walking around airports, grocery stores, all over the place. They have masks on still. It's 2026. They're like the last Japanese soldiers that didn't get the memo that World War II ended. Even with the vaccine in COVID, you had vaccines, boosters. It was a parody of science. But you could sit there at a school board meeting or talk to a liberal and you could try to reason with them like, hey, like go through point by point of like, hey, this is why this doesn't make sense. They would not listen to reason. It's like they're trapped in this cage. And I guess my takeaway from that whole situation, because I saw it up close and personal, you cannot reason with ideologues. If you are sitting there going, the science, the science, the science, and you're a cult member, and you're worshiping Anthony Fauci in a little prayer candle at home, there's no reasoning with you. You are a captured ideologue. But this facet of leftism that is now evident in the United States of America will not stop. These people will not stop unless they are physically stopped. They're not getting it. And unfortunately, I think everybody needs to understand that that's where we are, because you need to define the problem, because this version of leftism is very similar to communism. Communists are violent and incapable of reason. But if you look at this from political science, from history, absolutely nothing is going to de-escalate now. Because we've been talking leaders have been asking people to turn the temperature down for years. I talked about Charlie Kirk earlier in this rant. Charlie Kirk was killed like 6 months ago. That's it, 6 months. How soon we forget. And it's interesting thinking about Charlie Kirk. I remember I went to this like Catholic men's meeting, and it was literally like a few days after Charlie Kirk had been killed. And they did a prayer to kind of open up this thing, and everybody's kind of praying, and these guys were kind of just saying prayers. And one of these guys like literally almost started crying and said, please pray for our country. Our children need it. It was very emotional when Charlie Kirk got killed. And I think, yes, praying for our country is very, very good. We need a lot of prayer. We need a lot of prayer, but we also need to realize what time it is. What time it is we have one political party hell-bent on total power. And that political party hell-bent on total power has infiltrated education, judiciary, law, colleges, medicine. And we have the other major political party, the opposition party, that can't even pass the SAVE Act when 95% of their voters want it. The Republican Party looks like a bunch of absolute fools in this whole thing. None of these people understand the seriousness of this. This third attempt makes me sad. I talked about it. The third attempt makes me sad, but people like Obama and Jeffries make me angry. Because this type of language that they use just stokes it. And all this is a textbook color revolution. The left is like the Borg. Resistance is futile. They're the Terminator. And again, looking at history, the only way this ends is if you physically stop them. Because we are way deep into a color revolution at this point. Way deep in a color revolution. You are not in the good old days. You are in a leftist overthrow. And the interesting thing about Donald Trump is Donald Trump has the ability today to stop them peacefully. He actually could stop this. He could short circuit it. But I guess at this point, barring a miracle, I'm not seeing it. The rhinos certainly don't see it. I just mentioned that a second ago. Most of the right doesn't see it. And quite frankly, most of the left doesn't see it. And I guess Trump either doesn't see the long-term consequences or he's waiting for something. That would probably be the binary view at this point. But if I'm Donald Trump, to me, it would be pretty obvious that these people want me dead. So you would think that he would act. It's like he's like ignoring the left. I don't really understand it. Like he's just dismissing them like it's just a bunch of furries and blue hairs and not like the Khmer Rouge, the CCP, the Bolsheviks trying to take power. And I guess sorry to anybody that hasn't figured this out. I know people like Stephen Miller in the White House have, there are people that are verbalizing this. This is a late stage colored revolution. You can stop it. You can disrupt it now peacefully. But pretty soon it's going to take armed force. And unfortunately, what I'm afraid of is that, again, history is your guide. Look at the Spanish Civil War. What I think you might end up have happening is a U.S. Franco is going to emerge. Like a Spanish Franco is going to emerge in the U.S., a dictator of the empire. Look, I wish this was all different, but it's not. A third assassination attempt. Really? Charlie Kirk dead. It's not slowing down, guys. Political violence is going to increase. And to be fair, that's the mark of a failed state. It's a failed state. The third attempt makes the Secret Service look totally inept. It's an invitation for our enemies to act. 3 attempts on a president is banana republic stuff. Inept guards, poor defense, ideological capture of institution. It makes the U.S. look ridiculous. And I guess I'll go ahead and stop ranting about this. On the plus side of all this, guys, and I said this in COVID, now is a time for heroes. It's a time for heroes. There were people that stood up on COVID and pushed back and said, no more, we're not doing this. I still believe those people are out there. They're biding their time because great challenges present great opportunity. And I talked about prayer. We're all going to need to be brave. We're going to need to pray a lot. But I promise you, leaders are going to emerge. People are going to emerge from the ether to take the bull by the horns here. They always do. And it's like that cycle. Strong men create good times. I've said it before and I still maintain it. We are going to be fine, but this is going to be a really rocky road. But a third assassination attempt, man, we all need to be thinking about this pretty seriously. And people like Hakeem Jeffries and Obama, watch these people very closely. Watch them closely. They are not nice people. They're using the English language as a cudgel. It's really scary. So, okay, I guess we'll all be watching it, guys. So this would normally be the point where I would say switching gears, but I was told by a friend that they didn't like that. So I guess I'll just go into the next story and not do a segue. And I guess I'll just start that I saw a crazy story a few weeks ago and I kind of dismissed it, but it's evolved. And it's a story out of Australia. And it's funny, Australia is not like Folgers oil cans and Mick Dundee anymore. What Australia is now is like a woke socialist country. I always think about things through the lens of COVID. It was one of the strictest COVID states. But it's interesting with Australia. Australia has always been a core ally of the U.S. And it's almost like Canada. Seeing the woke slide is really, really hard to stomach. But I guess the story coming out of Australia is about this guy named Ben Robert Smith. Now, Smith was a member of the SARS. Well, what is that? That is the Special Air Service Regiment. So it's the highest special operations unit in Australia. SASR is built on the British SAS. But these guys this is Australia's best. It's like the Navy SEALs for Australia. Well, Smith is one of the most decorated soldiers in Australia's history, and not just the most decorated in SASR. He's the most decorated ever in Australian history, period. This would be like their Audie Murphy, Chesty Puller. This is who this is. This guy is the most decorated soldier in Australian history. He won a Medal for Gallantry, and he won the Victoria Cross for Australia. The Victoria Cross is their highest award. It's like a Medal of Honor. Well, Smith was discharged from SASR in 2013. He was discharged in 2013. He came home a national hero. This man, Smith, was named Australian Father of the Year in 2013. As soon as he was discharged, he engaged in a business. He became a top executive in some Australian media company. So this guy was like the toast of the town. Total Australian badass military guy, Father of the Year in Australia. Now he's working in the private sector. He's super successful. Well, in 2017, allegations about him arose. Rumors started spreading. Well, those allegations said that Australian soldiers led by Smith had committed war crimes. So there's like this rumor now. Those allegations about Smith committing war crimes stemmed from when him and his unit were stationed in Afghanistan. Well, Smith saying that I didn't do this. So Smith sues his accusers. He files a defamation suit. And that suit was extensive. It came out in the defamation suit. There were certainly areas in the war where his unit operated in the gray, but there was no criminal actionable activity against Smith. None. So there was no criminal activity ever levied against Smith. Ultimately, this defamation case that he filed was dropped. The judge ended up dismissing it. That wasn't the end of it, because now the military and police started investigating this issue. To be totally clear, from 2018 to 2022, 0 charges were ever brought against Smith. 0. This was all rumors. The police investigated it. The military investigated it. Reporters investigated it. He had filed a defamation suit, but nothing ever came of it. So 2018 to 2022, he's investigated, prodded, the whole thing. Nothing came out of it, so the whole thing blew over. The problem with it is that Smith, however, was disgraced publicly. His name was dragged through the mud. He was dragged through the mud publicly, him and his family. Well, here we are, it's 2026. This whole thing died down about 4 years ago. Well, April 7th, 2026, so what, just like a few weeks ago, Smith was arrested. He was arrested by federal police. He was arrested by federal police and charged with 5 counts of war crimes, specifically murder. This guy was arrested for alleged war crimes from 13 years ago, 5 counts of murder. To be absolutely clear, this whole thing was investigated before and it was totally dismissed. 0 charges ever came out. So I saw this whole thing where this guy was arrested and I flagged it to talk about it. And I decided not to talk about it because it's too obvious. Meaning it's just an obvious story. Like I'm not fluent in like what's going on in Australia. I don't really like, I don't know this whole thing, but it's just like, what's going on here? And obviously I can see which way it breaks because it's always the same ideological fault lines. And it's interesting because the media is all captured by the left. The response of the media in Australia was predictable to this issue. Because the woke half of the country thinks that Smith is just a white male war criminal. And of course, the nativist faction, the MAGA group in Australia, for lack of a better term, the nativist faction thinks that Smith is a persecuted hero. Again, it's ideological fault lines. So the political divide immediately becomes obvious in this whole situation. It would be like Democrats here in the state saying, this man is just the embodiment of evil. And then you would have the Republican side saying, hey, this guy's a hero. It's just too obvious of a story. Well, why am I talking about it now? There's a broader story here, and I think the broader story is what I find interesting. Because when I read a story like that, I'm not really worried about the guy himself, Smith himself. But my main thought when I read a story like that is the other soldiers. And it's almost like cops, like police officers here in the States. Police officers in the States cannot do their jobs anymore. If they arrest, shoot, detain anyone, they can be liable personally. Therefore, because it's all been litigated against them, cops cannot use force appropriately anymore. They can't draw a weapon. And the best example of this whole phenomenon is Daniel Penny in New York City. Daniel Penny was on a subway. He was a bystander who ended up stopping a criminal. He stopped a criminal. In any sane world, you'd be like, oh my God, thank God for this, social angel. This guy stepped in and protected the other citizens around him by stopping a criminal. He should be a hero, but he's not. He's not a hero. He's a white man attacking a black man and literally had to go on trial. Daniel Penny was criminally charged for doing the right thing. And fortunately for all of us, Daniel Penny was let off. But the point is that Penny's arrest is what? It's a cooler on other good Samaritans. And it's no different than Smith in the military. No different. It's the same as cops. Men in the military in war have to have latitude. Now, again, was this like the My Lai massacre? No, it wasn't. This was not anything like a My Lai massacre where people just lined up and blasted. But these guys operated in a conflict, and 13 years later, under a woke administration, all of a sudden what these guys did became a problem after it had been investigated and investigated and investigated. It's a cooler. It's a total cooler on other military guys because other military guys see this. They're probably chilled. And I don't think this is any different if you look at like that sedition video that happened just a couple months ago. You had Mark Kelly, Alyssa Slotkin. You have senators and Congress people urging our military broadly not to follow, quote, illegal orders. This type of public scrutiny into what our military does sows a seed of doubt in the chain of command. This challenging of a soldier and soldier morale is absolutely no joke. And again, broader issue. There's news that came out of the United Kingdom, a total parallel to this story. Here is the Telegraph in England just a week ago. There was a report that came out in the Telegraph that said SAS soldiers, again, these are the special operations guy in England. This report says SAS officers and soldiers are resigning en masse. Elite operators from SAS are leaving the military. They're taking voluntary retirement. The Telegraph cannot report how many of these guys are leaving the military. They can't say how many because of security reasons, but it is described as, quote, significant. Not only is it, quote, significant, it is also a, quote, threat to national security. There are 2 squadrons of SAS that's impacted by this. And you might ask the question, well, why are they leaving? SAS soldiers are leaving the military because they don't want to be victims of, quote, witch hunts by human rights lawyers. There are apparently probes now into SAS activity in Afghanistan and Syria. So they're going back into the records. They're trying to find what these guys did. They want to look under the hood and figure out if there's any human rights violations. It is no different as Smith in Australia. So in England right now, you have human rights lawyers that are digging into these guys. These lawyers are doing witch hunts with SAS operators. And the guys that are leaving are not, these are senior warrant officers. That's the backbone of SAS. So you're having all these like astroturfed investigations into wartime acts by woke progressive activists. Does this all sound familiar? This is exactly what Democrats have promised here in the States. Kelly, Slotkin, the Seditious Six. And to be totally clear, an order is not illegal if the commander-in-chief issued it. What they are doing with this whole exercise, do you remember that they said they're like, if you follow it, it's a threat. Our own military is being threatened by the Congress people, senators, etc. What they are doing, it is a woke tactic, and now it's being employed in Australia, England, and now in the United States. What they are doing is they're cooling the military. They're reshaping it. They're ruining it. And right now you have Britain and Australia that you are going to lose all of your fighting men. Britain and Australia are two woke jokes that let these rogue lawyers take over. And I don't know much, but that is internalized self-immolation by these two countries. You cannot do things like this. War fighters need to know that they can operate. They need to know that. Obviously, nobody wants war crimes. But this is politicization of a military. That's a cancer on a republic or a state. You are creating a paralysis on men who need to pull a trigger to keep us safe. When you look at history, when you do this type of stuff and you criticize and critique a military like this and then go after soldiers after the fact, you're killing the state. And again, the reason I didn't talk about this when I initially saw this, I don't know if Smith is innocent or not. It seems to me that they investigated. It would appear to me that he was, I mean, if you've been investigated that much, if you've gone through all these lawsuits, 5 years later, they're digging information up. I mean, my suspicion would be that he would be innocent. But again, I'm not in a position to make that determination. But I guess my point with it is I'm not some naive person who doesn't know what soldiers must do. Soldiers kill. I mean, look at any World War II. I'm sure plenty of U.S. soldiers took coup in Vietnam, Japan. Soldiers taking coup is as old as time. So you got Smith in Australia, you've got British SAS. That's a bad deal, man. It's really bad. And again, look, Democrats started that process here. They're laying the seed. All acts, all orders are legal until proven otherwise. You don't assume or suggest illegal orders were given, because of course there weren't any. But I'm telling you what, if Democrats get power again over our military, this is exactly what they're going to do. They're going to go after our best. They're going to go after our best. They're going to go after our best and start arresting them or drumming them out of the military. And what happens there? It's a air quotes threat to national security because you don't have your best war fighters in ranks anymore. But again, I just saw this whole progression here and it made me think of that Seditious Six. And man, it's just crazy. I'll be watching it. So, guys, I'm going to go ahead and wrap the show up for today. I have a bunch of stories that I want to get to in the 100th episode, so I'm going to go ahead and cut this one short. I do not know when we're coming out with the 100th episode. It's just mind-blowing to me that we're even at that many episodes, but I'll go ahead and wrap up today. So I guess if you like the show, please go ahead and tell a friend about it. If you would, please follow us on Spotify. You can also follow us on Instagram at Foggy Dew Daily. If you have questions for the show, please go ahead and email the show at foggydew95@gmail.com. But in the meantime, I'd ask you to say a prayer, ask questions, and stay vigilant. This is the Foggy Dew signing off.